Finally, we have an exciting fireside chat about future fuels, green energy, and sustainable practices in the maritime industry. This session will be moderated by two experts. Mr. Navin Pereira, Director Logistics at GAC Group, and Mr. Anuradha Haraskama, CEO of Hawks Colombo Private Limited. Both are trailblazers in their respective fields and will ensure a dynamic and thought-provoking discussion. Let's give them a warm round of applause. Now allow me to introduce our esteemed panelists for the fireside session. Dear panelists, as I call out your name, I kindly request you to take a seat and join us on stage. Mr. Deepak Dias, Managing Director, Lanka IOC. Mr. Zafir Hashim, President of Transportation Industry Group and the Plantation Sector at John Keells Holdings. Mr. Ganak Hemachandra, Managing Director, Sri Lanka Ports Authority. Mr. Upul Jinadasa, Chief Operating Officer, South Asia Gateway Terminals. Ms. Christina Prisa, Associate Partner of Hamburg Port Consulting. Lastly, Captain Prashant, Head of ESG and Public Affairs, South Asia, Maersk Lines.
All the vessels that we will build and own in the future will be able to run on carbon-neutral fuels such as methanol or ammonia.
Maersk has chosen to approach the incredibly difficult challenge of decarbonizing a very complex logistics network by investing in novel solutions.
Now we order 8 large vessels that can and will operate on green methanol.
We need to act now and drive material impact already this decade for our customers, for society, and for ourselves.
The science is very clear. We are in a climate emergency and we need to find solutions to address this climate crisis.
Not only will our new and future vessels help our ocean delivery become even more cost efficient and flexible, they will also directly contribute towards decarbonizing our supply chain.
Where there is a will, there is a way. And we have taken quite a few risks to have the ships at the time where we ordered it. The green methanol that we need to power it was not available. And we have worked since then to secure that methanol. And I think that this will really be a first very important step on our transition and a clear also leading example for what the industry can do when it puts its mind to it.
Designing, building and preparing for the world's first green methanol vessel has been a huge and great learning experience for everyone involved. Here we stand and we can't wait to start the maiden voyage towards Copenhagen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are awake after some tea or coffee. And first of all, thank you CNC for giving us the opportunity to talk about future fuels, climate and shipping in this CNC 24. I think you all saw the video, must have got an idea, but to add a little bit more point. As you all know, the whole world has been experiencing the severe weather changes, climate changes, over many decades, and increasing temperature in the atmosphere is posing a lot of damage to our day-to-day life as well. So one of the main causes of increasing temperature is the emission of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. So this is also a result of human activities. We are using excessive amount of fossil fuels, which is releasing carbon to the atmosphere for various activities such as heating, transportation, electricity, etc. So the greater concern have been raised on this subject, and luckily United Nations have adopted regulations to combat these challenges and save our planet. As a result, Paris Agreement was signed in 2016. This is a treaty aiming at reducing climate control. So this agreement has long-term temperature reduction objectives through reduction of greenhouse gases. So as you know, one way of reducing greenhouse gases is switching to more low carbon energy as well as sustainable fuels. Sustainable fuel is something which helps us to create a green planet. You can achieve this by making sustainable fuels using renewable materials. So this is our topic today. So we are talking about these areas, and we have an expert panel with us today who will take us through this. Thank you, and wish you have a good session.
I think, thanks, Anu. Just to shed some light on a more layman term, because we will be talking somewhat in some technical stuff in terms of bunkering and fuel, and some of you may not connect to it because there is a very varied audience. Just to understand, ESG is coming in a big way, whether we like it or not. It's going to come hit us hard. If we don't get our act right, we will be rejected from the rest of the world. So that's how simple as we can put it through. Because when they do their procurement in future in Europe, they will check how you manage your entire supply chain. And if you have more carbon footing, they will always highlight that, and that will be a reason for you not to be selected. So hence the reason why for this audience it will be quite unique and important for you to know. And as the video showed to you, Maersk saw this long time ago, and they've already taken certain steps to establish vessels and then to take the lead. So we have this eminent panel from the Ports Authority, from the terminals, SAGT, Hamburg Ports, and Captain Prashant, who has been who has been making recommendations to the IMO as well, and then Zafir and Mr. Deepak as well from a more bunkering and oil field experts. So we've got a very diversified panel, which we are also very proud to be sharing the stage with. So to start with, I'll get Anu to start with the first question.
Thank you, Naveen, and thank you, panelists, once again to be present here today. To commence the discussion, I would like to start with Zafir, who is an expert in this industry. In layman terms, as we have a lot of students and people here for their understanding, Zafir, could you explain us what is this conventional fuel and alternative fuels, and how it is important to the shipping industry and to the world as by and large? Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think Anu sort of covered a little bit about it, but let me go into a little more detail. I think this whole thing about the alternate fuel is mainly stemming from climate change, and how do you manage the impact of climate change going forward, because as we all know, it's a huge issue. So this whole thing stemmed, I think, from the 2015 Paris Agreement, where the main aim was globally to control the temperature going up to 2050, up to a maximum of 1.5% degrees, 1.5 degrees, compared to pre-industrial era. So that's the main aim that sort of was agreed between many leading countries in the world. I think about 100 and odd countries have sort of signed this treaty. It's a legally binding international treaty that has been signed. And that's the starting point. And from there, so in order to really sort of get to that goal of achieving a maximum of 1.5 degrees temperature control, one way of achieving that, there are many other things also that needs to be done, but one critical thing is in terms of how do we reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from the fuel that we are consuming. So this is not only applicable to the marine sector. I'm sorry, maybe there are people who know about it, but because there are a few students, I thought I'll go into a little more detail. So really, it is not only applicable to the marine sector, but it is applicable across to all sectors, whether it's aviation, maritime, industrial, whether it's the local transportation, railway, it's applicable to everything. But each industry body on its own is sort of setting their own targets to try and see the emissions that they are putting out, how do they control. So in terms of the maritime industry, the main body that's associated with the maritime industry is the IMO, International Maritime Organization. So they have the 2050 target, but in order to get to the 2050 target, they have sort of set their own targets for 2030 and 2050. These are at the moment, these are really not mandatory, but of course, it's a matter of time in terms of, I think the next review is probably in 2025, and probably in 2025, some of these things can get mandatory, and the shipping world has to adapt. So if you look at the conventional fuels that we use in the world, the main two conventional fuels that we use is heavy fuel oil, that is called low sulfur fuel oil, what we are using. Plus, we also have marine gas oil. These are the two main oils that we are using. But if you look at the carbon content in this fuel, it's quite high. And when we burn this fuel in a ship, there's a lot of emission that goes out, like carbon dioxide, we call it SOx, NOx, there are sulfur emissions, there are nitrogen emissions. So there are many types of gases that emits, which affects the environment. So the whole point is, we are trying to see, the world, I think they're trying to see as to how the conventional fuel now can be replaced with alternate fuels. So the alternate fuels, the good thing about the alternate fuels is, with the type of alternate fuel that you would use, this will reduce the greenhouse gas that will be emitted finally to the environment. So if you look at the types of the alternate fuels that's available today, there's biofuel, there is LNG, there is bio-LNG, there is methanol. I'm sure there are a few other experts who will also cover probably later in their presentations or their speeches. These particular fuel, for the short term, I think these are the ones that will really take off. But then on the longer term, there's also ammonia, there's also hydrogen, which will be used in the ships. So really at the moment, the conventional fuel that we are using will get phased out, and then the alternate fuels will I think come into play. And the target, I think, is at the moment, I'm sure Captain Prasant probably will touch upon this later, by 2050, they feel that the conventional fuels will drop down to as less as about 15% of what we are using. So 85% of the fuel that will be used at that particular point will be mostly the alternate fuels.
Yeah, so the second question, I think I would request Captain Prashant to support us on this. Based on the cue that we took from Zafir about the alternative fuels that is going to come through, what are the emerging trends that you see that is going to come through?
Thank you, Navin. And I think let me start by basically saying that Zafir has set the context very well in terms of really the background to why is this necessary. In the 2 minutes video that we saw here, I think the executives at Maersk, and I can echo that, but I think all of us in the room will believe that climate crisis is real. We've seen in the last decade 5-fold growth in black swan climate weather-driven events. And in that regard, as a company that has been around for 120 years, today has a footprint in more than 120 countries, we clearly have a responsibility. Leadership also leads to having a responsibility, which is what we've then gone ahead and actioned upon. From putting the first vessel out in the water, the one that we actually placed on order was a dual-fuel methanol vessel in 2020. And the first one that then came and entered into our fleet it was in September last year. From there, we today have 5 vessels on dual-fuel vessels on methanol, and we have an order for 20 more vessels over the next 18 odd months. In addition to that, also complementing what Zafir said, was important for us is to achieve net zero for shipping. And that's also where IMO is playing a key role as a regulator, that they go ahead and help us as shipping decarbonize. We are 3% of world's greenhouse gas emissions as shipping, and transportation as a sector is 10%. So each one of us has a responsibility, and in that context, we are agnostic of the fuels we eventually will have. So the pathway to decarbonization is less important. Achieving decarbonization is more. And while we started with methanol, and the reason for us to do that was because the technology was available, the engines were ready. Methanol is like water in a glass. You can relate to it, and we went ahead with that. But as we speak, we are piloting the engines on ammonia. We've placed another 50 ships on order over the next decade. By the end of this decade, we will have those. So it's between 27 to 2030. In those 4 years, we expect month after month another 50 ships coming in. And those ones will be on methanol as well. But we will also look at ammonia and bio-LNG. And as we go further into it and the conversation, we'll talk about it. Now, Naveen, to get into the trends part of it and setting aside the fuels and the discussion around that, I think regulation is key. And we'll talk more, but the only way you can achieve a shift in an industry is when you make it mandatory and a level playing field is created. Because collaboration across the ecosystem, as well as each stakeholder in the ecosystem, not least a ship owner like ourselves, need to step up and engage further. While we look at regulators, there's also technological advancements, and some of the technologies that we are looking at across these fuel mixes are on technology readiness levels of 9. And what is important here is that alongside the technology and the regulation, you need the suppliers to jump off the fence to embrace the technology. And that's where we need to create the demand. So that's basically the chicken and egg thing, that we have now placed the demand, we need the suppliers. And alongside all of this is a key component, which is the economics. And we'll talk more about it as we go further. But that's really just to bring you up to snuff with the ecosystem stakeholders. And then the dynamics is what we'll discuss over the next few minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Captain. I think Anu, you want to take the next one?
Coming back to Sankar again, now we have talked about various types of alternative fuels. Sankar, could you tell us whether the ships can immediately shift to using these alternative fuels, or whether the new vessels should be designed with this ability to use alternative fuels or biofuels in the future?
Yeah, so I think, as both of us said, there are multiple types of fuel, alternate fuels that's available. But if you really take the top 4 or 5 that is there, so if I start with biofuel, so biofuel is very similar to the conventional fuel that we use. So the base of the biofuel is the conventional fuel. So basically you will have a LSFO or a MGO, that will be the base. And then you will have biomass additives that will go on to this, and it will be blended and used. So generally these are sort of categorized as B5, B20, B30. So what the number sort of represents is the amount of biomass that you will add on to that main base product. So it's because it's a blend. So in that context, because the base itself is a product that you currently use now, up to, I think, about a B20, B25 sort of thing, you can use in the engines with minor adjustments. So in terms of adaptation of biofuel to the market, as at now for conventional vessels, it's easier. So in that respect, biofuel, that's why I said in the short term, probably that's one thing that people can use. And even if you take the uptake in Singapore, which is the world's largest bunker market, in 2022, the amount of biofuel they sold was about 150,000 metric tons. In 23, it went up to 500,000 metric tons. And calendar year 24, this is going to be in excess of, still as a proportion of the total market in Singapore, it's still about 1.5%. But you can see the rate at which that it is growing. But then if you take the next one, methanol, like what Captain mentioned, I think methanol, again, is something that you can use with minor adjustments to the engines. So in terms of adaptation, that becomes easier to adapt methanol. Then we have LNG. LNG, because the product itself cannot be stored under normal conditions, it has to be stored under cryogenic conditions, it cannot be used, the way it is on normal vessels. The vessels have to be taken to dockyard or whatever, and then you have to actually invest on the storage, because the storage itself will have to be, should be able to store at very low temperature and very high pressure. So that's going to sort of cost a lot of money, and also it's going to take a little bit of time off the ship because you'll have to take it to the dockyard. But of course, the product itself is a good product because once you use LNG, the CO2, the NOx, the SOx emissions levels will be much better than the conventional fuels. Then the other part is ammonia. If you look at ammonia, that's a little tricky. Again, it cannot be used directly into the vessels the way it is, so it has to be new builds. So I think that's what Captain Prashant was explaining. Some of the ammonia vessels, I think, will come later on. Probably the first vessel might come around 26, 27. But ammonia being ammonia, it is very toxic and it's very it's a corrosive product, element. It cannot be used. It cannot be stored easily. So the storage mechanism that you need to build in the vessel has to be done very, very carefully without any leakages, because if there are leakages because of the toxicity of the product itself, it can be quite dangerous. Then hydrogen is another ball game on its own, because hydrogen itself, as you know, is a gas. But for hydrogen to stay in liquid form, it has to be stored at minus 250 degrees. And so you can imagine the type of containers or the vessels that you need to be able to store hydrogen itself. And it also will have to be stored at very, very high pressure. So really those are products that is there. But hydrogen as a fuel, it's a very, very clean fuel. So even if you look at all the spacecrafts that goes, currently they use hydrogen as a fuel for propulsion. So ammonia and hydrogen, I think, will probably come a little later, but of course, companies like Maersk has already taken that stance. I presume I answered your question.
Thanks, Safir. I think taking the last two answers into consideration, I mean, the available fuels and the complexities in handling them also. Captain, do you think that it's easy for lines to adapt into it? That's one question that I have for you. And how important is the regulation? I think regulation will make it more mandatory for people to move into it, because definitely with this infrastructure and the technologies that you need to bring on board, it's going to be incremental cost for sure. So how does lines see this?
Yeah. Navin, nothing is easy, and if it's easy, then it's not fun, right? I think we are all up for challenges, and our resilience and agility is the way forward, right, for all of us. So embracing that is probably more the way forward, and not an option. But I think it's easy for us as Maersk because we have clarity of thought. Our purpose is to improve life for all by integrating the world. And when we are the leaders, this is where we believe that we have an opportunity to demonstrate leadership. The time to act is now, and around it, if we were to keep sitting on the fence while climate crisis was hitting all of us, which is inevitable, and waiting for regulations, which of course are necessary, then we are not demonstrating leadership. And through the vessels that we have ordered, while we have 5 in the water and 20 more on order, followed by another 50 that I mentioned before, the industry has got more than 200 ships on order. So what we have then done is, leadership also of course needs followership. What we've done is that by virtue of us proving that this is possible and it's the right thing to do, a big part of the liner companies have actually followed suit. And this is not an area where we like to compete. It's not fixing a box. This is an area where we need to come together. So we collaborate with other shipping lines, but also are very much open to collaborating across the industry with governments, with port authorities, and even beyond, because this is basically towards humanity, towards our own existence. We owe it to our children and beyond. Having said that, regulations will be key, and that's because it will set the least common denominator. IMO, which is a United Nations organization, will and continues to define regulations across the globe. What Zafir mentioned before has been that we would like to then And we have been very strongly advocating, and my role in public affairs, working very closely with the governments and ESG, is integral to this, which is really about advocating towards member states. And that's also something where countries in South Asia, not least where we sit here in the great nation of Sri Lanka, have a voice in IMO. And that's what we need to leverage. What IMO has done over the last couple of years is they have progressed towards saying that they would like to have, and I use the word like to because they're yet to get that firmed up, right? But they like to have shipping decarbonized by 2050, right? And while they say 2050, it's great because that's for the shipping companies which, on an average, a ship owner has 3 ships. We as Maersk could, of course, talk about it from a 700 ships standpoint. But it's important that we take everyone together. So 2050 is a great starting point. The roadmap around it is what is being discussed as we speak. And in that roadmap is where they are clearly looking at setting some near-term targets. So they have a clear mandate to set up the mid-term measures, which is what we are hoping for in the April 25 MEPC session, that they come out with some tangible pathways with targets, tangible objectives for shipping to embrace. And that is where the rubber starts to hit the road. And the voluntary players like us who have been digging deep into our pockets because methanol costs 3 times more of fossil fuel. And our customers, of course, have a limit. And eventually all of us as consumers of our customers have a limit to how much can we pay for green products. So we need to get the IMO to step up, set the level playing field, and that is what we are advocating. And a big part of that is good conversations moving in the right direction, and we are very hopeful that that is something which will continue to strengthen going forward.
Thank you, Captain. I think from leading from that, I think even the alliances and the partnerships that's going to come forward, these will be taken into consideration, right? Before you even decide on a next alliance, whether they are also compliant on ESG, these questions will be asked, right?
Absolutely, and I think we are already asking this, and we'll speak a little bit more about what we do as in the ESG space, but it's very important that birds of the same feather flock together, and customers, investors who are working with us, who are leaders in their respective industries, sectors, are all rooting for this because it's the right thing to do. And then the idea is that we actually come together, form the alliances, and nudge the rest of the industry to follow suit. And regulation there will be a key enabler for that.
Thank you, Kevin. I think for the audience, this is something that we must take back home. ESG is also coming in a very strong way, like compliance did. There were times when companies, before they select you as a vendor, they'll check for your compliance and your procedures that you manage. Based on that, they would award you, not based on the price necessarily. So it's this session is all about highlighting the fact that ESG is important, it's coming in a big way, and that we as partners of the supply chain need to be prepared and adapt to it. So that's the ground rule coming through. So next, Anu is.
Thank you, Navin. We have heard about various type of alternative fuels available, and also the order book has already ordered a number of ships, and Captain Prashant has rightly said, the suppliers also has to be ready to supply these alternative fuels. We have multiple types of fuels. So, Mr. Deepak, I would like to ask from you, what is your view of the readiness of suppliers around the world, whether these alternative fuels are freely available in all parts of the world, and what is the readiness of ship owners to ship to alternative fuels, looking at the cost, etc. Of course, most has committed to do that. By and large, what is the view you have with regards to others?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. So I think as my fellow speakers have said, I think maritime industry have been under pressure, to decarbonize, and I think everything started with the IMO 2020, where the sulfur cap was put at 0.5 instead of 3.5, and thereby there are further targets were taken. I think 2030. greenhouse emission targets to reach at 20% lesser than the 2008 levels, thriving to be 30%. Then 2040 targets are at 70%, vis-a-vis 2008 levels, thriving to be 80%, and then 2040 total net zero. Now this is putting a lot of pressure into the ecosystem, maritime ecosystem, to shift to the renewables, alternatives. So I would say a lot of efforts are being done across the globe, in various capacities, depending upon the kind of countries they're dealing with, and type of I would say socio-economic situations, economic, and also geopolitical situations. So if I talk about the alternative fuels, I think I need to start with LNG first, because that is where a lot of thing has happened. This being LNG is now a proven technology, it's been widely used in many parts of the world. Mostly, I would say, still is in Europe and America. And this is something I would say already readily available many parts of many ports across the globe, like in Europe, Rotterdam, in US, I would say Houston and LA, then in Singapore, in Asia, and also China and Korea. So this is already I would say a tested alternative. And at present, approximately 200 and I think 2030 figures are at 200 ships are already on LNG, and I think the latest figures are close something around 250 ships. So going ahead, I would say LNG will always remain a first choice as of now, as we see, and because of its availability and other things that I have told you. But it has got its own challenges, let's say, because after all it is a fossil fuel, and when we have to achieve a net zero by 2050, I think the other alternatives will come into picture. So I would say a lot of infrastructure has come up for LNG across the globe. And next, if I say biofuels. So biofuels, again, it's more important issue is availability. Now countries which are rich in biofuels are like North American countries, let's say US and Canada, and also European countries like, so those, though they are in a position to actually do the trial and all, and in Dutch ports like Rotterdam, in Hamburg, and also in I think Amsterdam, so pilots are being happening on biofuels. And so what I'm trying to say is, other than LNG, I think other fuels like biofuels are still in a pilot stage. So either in the pilot or in the trial phases. So then if I talk about next is hydrogen, again is a very cost intensive type of alternatives. But yes, a lot of countries are working on this, mostly in Europe and US. And then I think a lot of talk has happened regarding ammonia, and already Musk is doing a lot of things in that. And many other countries are also, in Europe are working on this. And I think in Japan and Korea also a lot of work is happening. So I would say, in a nutshell, a lot of work is happening, but we have still a long way to go. I think all the efforts to reach to that milestones are also hampered by socio-economic situations, geopolitical situations. A lot of, I think, goals will be rescheduled, because of the recent incidences that has happened, across the globe. But yes, there is a focus on shifting to renewables, and maybe LNG will be there in the near future, and then shift to the other options like ammonia, maybe methanol, and other hydrogen, all those things, depending upon how the technology evolves. So as the technology evolves, I think we'll have more options, and the key would be going ahead is the cost effectiveness of it. Now coming back to the last point that you made about preparedness of suppliers, yes, I think as the technology evolves, and as the regulations has already told, are being enforced, I think suppliers will be in a position to supply. I can talk about LIOC. I can also talk about our parent company IOCL. We have established LNG facility in Cochin, along with the Petronet LNG and all. And so I think we are in a position to help the country to migrate from the conventional fuels to the renewables and also alternative fuels.
Yeah, thank you for the insight. As you rightly mentioned, LNG has been preferred for the new options because mostly the ECA areas, the emission control areas, especially in Europe and US, has been using LNG for many years. And now it is continuing to other part of the world as well, as Singapore has taken initiative. AP has invested their own money to promote LNG in Singapore ports and also the other alternative fuels, especially easily replaceable fuels like biofuels are available in different ports right now. And I think gradually we will see the other alternative fuels like methanol, ammonia also available in with the increase of users, which is coming into play. I'm sure hopefully by 2030, I think we see better availability around the world for alternative fuels, which is important. Naveen, over to you. Next question.
No, just to add something to what Deepak said, I think I had the luxury of visiting Cochin, and I realized that the Cochin airport was completely solar, and there's no fossil fuels being burned. It's a green airport. And so it's not far away from Sri Lanka. So we have examples to take from India. So that's one aspect. And I think LNG is not only supplied to vessels, they're also currently providing for vehicles as well. So they have a couple of buses which run on LNG, and they have LNG sheds, yes, which provides LNG. So it's not far away, guys. It's just next door. So it's about time that we discuss as a nation and then adopt these technologies, which is already available and it's nearby. Thank you. Christina, hi. Sorry for keeping you waiting. We got all engrossed with the fuel. Yeah, coming back to from a more ports perspective and from a terminals perspective, Hamburg and Rotterdam, we've seen these changes being taken already, and you all have gone further into the discussions, and you all have some experience in the change management. So would you like to share some thoughts with us in terms of how you all went into this change?
Yeah, a lot of... Thanks. Okay. Yeah, so Hamburg actually is not worldwide known, obviously, because when you use ChatGPT and have a look and pose questions like that, what comes up is obviously Singapore, is Rotterdam, so they are well known. But actually what has been done in Hamburg is quite a lot towards greening, towards modernizing terminals, etc. So this is, yeah, I talked about it this morning. It's smart port, it's technologies, it's automation of terminal operations. So, for example, one of the container terminals, Container Terminal Altenwerder in Hamburg, was worldwide the first climate neutral terminal. And has got the certificate now for the second time. It was renewed. It operates with automated guided vehicles, so driverless, all remote controlled, and they have batteries which are then exchanged in battery stations on the terminal. These are powered with renewable energy. So this is a large step forward on the terminal. Currently, the second container terminal is also converted, so it's a on-the-job conversion, which poses additional challenges. So, in addition, this is not just the operation on the terminal, is also the control of the traffic approaching the terminal. So there are the system of trucker cards, so that the truckers know, okay, now I can go into the port. I don't have to wait a long time. There is increasingly trying out also electric trucks, at least in the city center. So it's about the traffic management, it's about communication, also use of renewable energies for other purposes. And then, of course, you have the big issue of using artificial intelligence, using simulation for modeling your terminal so that you know what's going to happen in almost real time. You have the data analytics, you have the use of predictive maintenance. So that means you can very well plan when your equipment has to be undergo maintenance and repairs. So there's that you avoid actual breakdowns, obviously, but also you can plan well ahead about what you need, about spare parts and organization of all that. So to identify defects, they are using drones. So nobody has actually to climb up and down a couple of times, but the drones will show where the challenges are. So all of that, digital communication, and also the use of intermodal facilities. So the Altenwerder, the terminal, is also a big rail terminal, actually. So not just using trucks, but every day many full trains go in and out. So it's a huge terminal for train traffic. So all that contributes from the port point of view in technical measures on how to proceed.
So quite interesting is that there's a lot of infrastructure developments and there is a cost element to this. So how did the community react to this in terms of, was this cost passed down to the shippers or was it absorbed by the government? How did you all manage that?
Certain things the terminal operator considers suitable because, as you know, in Europe we are great on regulations and rules, so you want to be ahead of time, right? So when you are faster than the others, you got a benefit like that. And of course, terminal charges are not necessarily cheap, but not much higher, I would say, than in other ports. So it's not that's not the point. And simultaneously, Hamburg also gives some incentives for shippers, for shipping lines who use behave climate friendly, so to speak. So there's a reduction in port use for using shore power and for using renewable energies or non-fossil fuels. I cannot actually say how the community reacted. It's accepted, right? Because Germany, especially, would like to be on the forefront of bringing this forward. We got rid of nuclear power stations. We got rid of coal-fired power stations. So we have to do something, and that's the way we are going. So it's just widely accepted, mostly.
Thank you.
Thanks. Captain Krishna, I would like to tap your knowledge once again to share your best practices, maybe ask you this question. How do global shipping companies perceive the costs versus benefit of adopting green technologies, alternative fuels, and factors could influence their decision making?
Thank you. I think we've already brought the cost into the room here, and my good colleague just spoke about it from HPC. I think even before the cost, at this point in time, a larger challenge for us is the lack of supply of green fuels. As I said, we have 200 ships that are on order. And just to give you all some facts, and they're not fun because we don't have the supply, but by the end of this decade, shipping will need 30 million tons of green fuels. And today, we have less than 500,000 tons of green fuel that's available. Maersk alone will need 5 million tons of green fuel by the end of this decade. I would actually want to convert this challenge into a huge opportunity that the world has. We are already seeing Singapore. Yesterday, we had Tanjung Pelepas doing their first methanol bunkering. And for me, having spent the last few days here in Sri Lanka, I think it's a huge window of opportunity for this great country. Why do I say that? Because clearly we have the ingredients. What are the ingredients? We will need a strong policy environment that needs to be conceived. And it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about actually looking outwards into our neighbors. And my good colleague Deepak just spoke about IOC in India and Cochin. India has just done a green hydrogen policy, a green hydrogen mission. Hydrogen is a key denominator in the entire green fuel journey. So how can Sri Lanka, through the policy environment, incentivize global players to come in and set up hydrogen production, right? That's one. Second, we are gifted as a country with good wind. In fact, most of the countries may not have this, what we have, and then also sun. So renewable energy is another important aspect that goes into making sure that green powering of hydrogen electrolyzers is what we have. And last is, as a country that is very strong on agri, there's good carbon. What I say good carbon is the biomass, the biogenic carbon. So when you put all three of these together, which this country has, all it needs is the right intent, the right leadership, and customers like us who are willing to actually say that we would like to bring our ships. We already do that for transshipment and even beyond. We would like to bring our ships. We continue to use our Colombo as a key hub in our Gemini network. It will only get more stronger. And can we also then have green fuels from this country that we can continue to have? So I think that's basically the cornerstone. Now that's the supply side of the equation. Cost comes subsequently. And cost is something which today, of course, we are bearing, but we cannot bear it for long. And each ecosystem stakeholder, from regulators to top investment financial stakeholders, multilaterals like the World Bank, IFC, ADBs of the world, need to step up. And similarly, suppliers who are looking at technologies, they need to get, and we are already doing that through our partnerships, we are giving long-term offtake agreements. So we are doing 10-year offtake agreements, binding agreements, which is what a supplier takes to the banks to actually raise finance, right? We know how difficult that can be, but for who we are and our credibility, having been stock listed for over a century, is what brings this equation. So each one of us then needs to come together. Cost will only go down from where we are today, but the faster we scale as an industry and the demand which is then aggregated, the faster the supply will come online and the unit economics will make more sense.
Thank you, Captain. I think it gives a good outlook for us to see what more opportunities are there. Now, I mean, in yesterday's panel discussions, we were talking about how we can make Sri Lanka more attractive for ships to call here. And we were talking about Sri Lanka becoming a hub, not just for container, but for other services as well. So if we can expand our bunkering and fuel supplies in terms of these renewable fuels that we're looking at, That's going to be quite critical in terms of attracting ships here. But I think one of the questions there would be, where should we invest on? Whether it's going to be LNG, whether it's going to be biofuels, or which one is going to take the lead. I think that's going to be the critical decision that probably Zafir and Deepak would have to take in your day-to-day discussions. So, Anu?
Yeah, now in fact we are looking at few points onto that, as Nani rightly mentions. We have a clear mandate from us now. We are looking for alternative fuels, we are looking for greener fuels. As an industry, as a marketing industry, our industry could focus on creating or making availability of these alternative fuels going forward basis. And we also have our authorities here, the Ministry of Shipping, and also our master and also officials. I think these are some of the opportunities that we need to grab and starting a dialogue as to how we could keep these services or alternative options available in Sri Lanka, because we are in a transition stage right now. So it's high time that we should start having the dialogue and prepare ourselves to have all these options available at least towards 2030, and this will be definitely a lot of economic benefits to the country, creating more employment opportunities in this country, and will definitely benefit the industry as a whole. Thank you, and I'd like to shift to Mr. Upul Jinadasa, and as we progress on the type of available fuels, and we would like to talk about the application and the readiness of the ports with regards to these fuels. So I would like to ask this question from Mr. Upul Jinadasa. What are the key challenges in transition from traditional fuels to green alternatives in shipping, both from a technical and economic standpoint? Further to what Captain Prashant explained, if you could talk a little bit more on that, Mr. Jinadasa. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu. I think there are a lot of insights were shared by Prashant and Safir and Deepak. If I may sidetrack a little bit, and few years back there was a weather phenomenon called El Nino, and since then, now we are feeling the heat as Sri Lanka. You know, our weather pattern has completely changed. You know, the northeast monsoon and the southwest monsoon all going haywire, and today, now you see, you know, you are aware, about 400,000 people are displaced because of floods. And more than that, the port had to stop work for about 2.5 days, which means we don't have any revenue for 2.5 days. So this is the impact of the global warming. Since about few years back, it goes back to about the El Nino days. Now, we have been marketing the port of Colombo as an all-weather port. We have been going and talking to all the shipping lines and then inviting them to come and transact with us. We say that we have no tidal restrictions. We are working 24/7, 365. But that phenomenon has now changed. For about 3-4 years back, since then that we are now witnessing that every year that we have some disruptions. But this is the impact of the global warming. There's nothing else. So now, as Sri Lankans, we have a responsibility to ensure that we have our continuity and we have our revenue streams not affected and our people are not affected. So what we do, and then it is similar to what the shipping lines are also pursuing. The regulator in the industry is the IMO, as Safir very rightfully explained. Now, the IMO had done a study way back in 2008, and based on the 2008 as the baseline, and projecting about 5% of the global carbon emissions from the shipping industry, the ships and the ports. And then if we don't arrest it somehow, it is expected to reach about 16% by 2030, and it's going to go beyond 50% by 2040. Yeah? So if you don't do anything. So that is why the shipping lines like Maersk and all other leading shipping lines are now they are engaged in adopting various technologies, exploring things. But unfortunately, since 2015 that we had the Paris Accord, and then where all the countries got together and agreed, look, we will do everything possible to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. But now coming back to the Baku, the conference we just finished, but there is major disagreement between the countries. So now for 9 years we have been talking. And then we still couldn't come into an agreement. Look, what are we going to do? So our industry is also the same. We are all, talking, and then, somebody taking the lead. There are a lot of things happening. A lot of technology inventions are happening. And these young people who are here, and there's a career for you. There's a lot of exploration happening. A lot of research is going on. But unfortunately, we still couldn't come to some kind of a standard. How are we going to tackle this problem? So we are trying in isolation. So as the Colombo port and the government of Sri Lanka also are committed to IMO commitment, so that we also have resolved that by 2050 we'll be net zero. So as far as the port is concerned, port is a heavy consumer of energy. That if there's no energy, then of course, the port cannot function. Fortunately, about 40% of our electricity is generated from hydro. So 40% of our energy consumption is green when it comes to electricity. So electricity is relatively a greener source for us. But then comes the diesel, because most of the equipment currently in the port, majority are diesel powered, so that the diesel consumption is heavy. So what SAGD did was we invested on hybrid technology, and then we converted all our RTGs into hybrid, the battery powered with charged with the auxiliary engine. So we were able to bring down diesel consumption by about 50%. Now, SAGT started our ESG journey about 6 years back, and we just published our 5th consecutive sustainability report. And over the 6 years, through our efforts, we were able to bring down our carbon emissions by 38%, 38. And our carbon emissions per TEU remains at about 8 kilograms of carbon dioxide per TEU. So we are very, very, very in good, compared with the rest of the world, the ports. You can't compare, apple to apple, because, we are a different port, and a similar port, we are doing very well. But this is not enough. Now, when it comes to ports are commercial, shipping lines are commercial. Currently, the technology is very expensive, the green energy. And we commissioned a study recently with a global expert. How do we deploy, how do we engage, how do we adopt green fuel to power some of our equipment? So we looked at generating at least about 1 megawatt power through green hydrogen. So we went into detail, and then we found, look, it's a bit of a costly affair, and it is not feasible for us to do, because if it is not green, it's either blue or gray, it doesn't make sense for us. So if it is green, you have to generate or produce hydrogen, green hydrogen, with the solar or the wind. But unfortunately, port is restricted in space, so we can't do that here. But having said all that, and we have a lot of opportunities as well. So we are talking about empowering Sri Lanka's hub aspirations. So if Sri Lanka becomes a maritime hub, that gives rise to various other hubs as well. So one of the other hubs, the potential that what we have is to get into energy hub. We have an untapped wind and solar potential of about exceeding 75 gigawatt hours. Current consumption of the entire Sri Lanka is about 5 gigawatt, right? So we have about, say, 15 times more than what we really need. So if we tap that, and then if we can produce green hydrogen and then methanol or ammonia, which are a bit complicated, and Safir explained very well, so we should be able to become an energy hub as well. And then, as Prashant very rightfully said, Maersk, and then, almost all the leading shipping lines, they have gone into equipping their ships, or the new ships, dual fuel, and also some of the current ships also, they have retrofitted with dual fuel. And then, we should be able to cater to that market. So that way, economically, we can sustain as well. So that is what I would like to contribute at this point, and then maybe I can share some thoughts later. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for this insight. As you rightly said, I think SAGT has done a lot of initiatives with regards to the application of greener initiatives. So as we understand from yesterday's panelist was talking about, West Container Terminal going to semi-automation, and also ECT. It's also taking a lot of initiatives with regards to these transitions. Once again, I'd like to come back to Deepak. Now we have seen the demand, we have seen the oil, and we have the issue with the availability right now. And we also talk about availability in India. Now India becoming a major economic hub and be an economic giant in the region. We are looking at intra-Asia imports and export going up gradually. Now, since these demands and supplies are coming from regional ports, have you assessed the availability of all these alternative fuels in our South Asian region as well? Of course, Sri Lanka is yet to get ready. Looking at other regional countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Maldives, etc. What do you think about the availability? Do you think they have prepared themselves to offer these services, since your vessels going from India to other regions also require to refuel in other locations as well? Thank you.
So let me start with then India first, because it is a big maritime market. For the knowledge of the audience, there are 229 ports are there in India. So out of that, 12 are major ports. And the Indian government has got a definite, net zero target, and they are implementing it, vigorously. In terms of maritime fuel, I would say LNG is definitely something that the government of India is, pursuing very vigorously. There are, as on date, 7 LNG import terminals in India, 5 in the west coast, 2 in the east coast. And pipelines are being laid across, the country to make this product available everywhere. So, as you said, the nearest to Sri Lanka is Cochin. Kochi already has a LNG import terminal. And there already, the LNG bunkering has been implemented. So now they are also trying to now move it to Mumbai and then JNPT. Likewise, cover all the, the major ports into LNG. So which will make at least that alternative product available. But as regard to, the total net zero, I would say they are also focusing on biogas. So there are almost 1,000 compressed biogas, CBG plants are being made, across Nook and across the country. And many of them will be, connected to this for taking care of the bunkering. So I would say India, and also there are a lot of things are going on in ammonia and hydrogen also, which are in different R&D, stages. Our parent company, IOCL, is also involved in all this endeavor, including LNG. We ourselves has a LNG import terminal in the East Coast. We also own a lot of geographical area, where LNG is, connected to households. So we are looking into some million of households, being connected to LNG. So a lot of things are also, we are also working on, testing and piloting this use of ammonia and hydrogen also. So some of our refineries also are producing hydrogen, and those are being used into, as a trial basis. So a lot of things are happening. I would say India is on track to achieve those, net zero goals, and our Prime Minister is very particular about that they are going to, achieve those targets. And I think they have also committed the same thing in the last Baku meeting also. Coming back to the other regional countries, like let's say Bangladesh. Bangladesh, Chittagong is the most important port. Bangladesh as a country, I think they are trying to, get LNG into first power sectors, and nothing much visible on the maritime sector as such. But yes, they have a plan to, shift to. But these are, I would say, in a very nascent stage. And all other alternative fuels are not in the scheme of things as of now. Coming to Pakistan, I would say the situation is similar only. I think nothing much has happened on any alternative or renewable fuels in terms of maritime. But though they have made their wish, to shift to at least LNG going ahead for power, and also, for maritime. Something is happening on power, but nothing is happening as of now on maritime. Coming to Maldives, I would say, given the country's dependency on tourism and also the type of effects, I mean, they have a lot of coastal transportation, which involves, a lot of fossil fuel and all, and the type of effects that may create into the type of operation that they do and also effect on the environment. They are very keen to at least shift to at least one renewable energy. But the problem they are facing is the economy of scale. So because the type of economy scale does not allow them to immediately shift. So I would say in the Indian subcontinent, other than India, I think nothing much is happening on the alternative fuels and maritime sector. Coming back to your previous one, you said that supplier has to decide. I would say it's the other way around actually. It is all depend on demand. If today Maersk says that they want they want LNG, then we will provide LNG. So it is the demand will be created by the industry, and the supplier will follow the suit. I think we are well equipped to follow that, and as and when the requirement comes, I think we'll be able to shift to those kind of facilities and create facilities. But having said that, I would say, as coming back to Sri Lanka, I think the basic facilities are not up to the mark as of now. We need to focus on that first. I think going ahead, other things can follow.
Thank you, Deepa, for the insight. Once again, yeah, as you rightly said, it's high time for the industry, bunkering industry, as well as the shipping industry to work together with regional players as well, and to identify the demand for different type of fuels, and we can work together with India to share some best practices and implement in the region as well. Thank you once again. Naveen, over to you.
Just to add to that, I think now Yugadanavi project, they are looking for LNG as a source. Now currently the discussions are going on. I think Captain Nirmal is also on the forum here. He also could add value here. Now there were discussions whether this should be brought in containers, ISO, and it's a 5-year project, or whether we should bring in an FSRU, which is again, it's too much of a kill. So economies of scale, they're looking at shuttling between India and Sri Lanka for 5 years. So opportunity is there, since you asked. So opportunity is there, readiness is the question. So from a port's angle, Zafir, would you like to shed some light on that? I mean, opportunity is there. Currently it's there. I mean,
So I think, yeah, the opportunity is there. I think one thing that's sort of different to what happened in 2020, where the thing is this problem is not only for the maritime sector. This is across. So that, I think, as much as, now what happens is because the problem is across, the demand will not only come from the maritime sector, it will come from all sorts of sectors. Whilst that's a challenge, the opportunity is that because it's a greater problem than the maritime problem, there'll be a lot of funding that'll go into research, and technology will probably evolve faster for these things because it's a global issue that needs to be sorted. But from a Sri Lankan perspective, I think what is required is, now you can see from what Deepak just said, India Prime Minister himself is involved in this. So there is some level of understanding as to where this whole problem is, what the policy. So I think what is required in Sri Lanka is that all stakeholders need to get together and really understand what the issue is. I'm really not sure whether there is a platform like that between the private sector and the public sector where everybody's kind of sitting in one room and understanding and saying that these are the policies that's going to come. These are the 2030 targets. These are the 2040 targets. These are the final net zero. And what are we really going to do? Because it is a complex issue. The issue is that earlier when it was in 2020, we knew 3.5% sulfur is going to be 0.5% sulfur, one particular product. You just store it. That's it. But here, from what Captain Prashanth is saying, there are so many different alternatives. Are you going to store LNG? Are you going to store methanol? And each one of these is not very easy to store. It has its own complexities. And the capitals that is required for funding this kind of storage is immense. And I don't think one particular stakeholder can on its own do this. I think there has to be a combined effort between the government and also the private sector. And also Captain Prashanth was telling me earlier, there are also, the good part is there are also funding that is available for developing countries. I'm sure he will expand on this a little later. There's also funding available for developing nations like us, as long as we get our act together. So it's so important that I think all stakeholders get together. really understand what the issues are ahead of us. And then we started sort of saying, look, what is it that we are going to focus? Because we'll have to understand what our customer base is and what those customer base, what those shipping lines, what is the fuel that they are going to mainly attract. Because I don't think we will be able to cater to everything in a very short time. Sure. We might have to sort of take a bet on something and then transit, kind of the transition will happen to sort of having multiple fuels available, because LNG terminals or building an ammonia terminal or addition, these will involve, I'm sure, lots of money. So I think that's a great thing. But I think I just want to emphasize again on what Upul said and Captain Prasant said. I think the greatest opportunity is the potential renewable energy capacity that Sri Lanka has. Actually, if we get private sector investment into that, it's like pretty much like Saudi Arabia. We'll have crude, we'll have the green hydrogen, we'll have green hydrogen here, and that's the base to have green methanol and all that. So again, that's a massive opportunity that we have at Sri Lanka.
Thanks, Safir.
Naveen, if I can just compliment what Zafir just said, right? The opportunity is there, and the leadership and the policy side has to come out very strong. In terms of the surplus RE, renewable energy, it's quite evident in the ambition to making Sri Lanka the energy hub is the ambition, right? Once we have the leadership setting the ambition, then stakeholders can come together in a room, lock the room and throw the keys out, and then they need to come up with a strategy and priorities. That's exactly how we did. When we set our 2040 net zero strategy, 2030 near-term targets, we didn't know how to get there. And there are a lot of questions that we don't have answers to. But the first big step is to acknowledge that we don't have answers to all questions, right? And we are not supposed to have answers to all questions because we are not the ecosystem. We are a part of the ecosystem. And when we have complementary stakeholders in the ecosystem coming together, locking themselves up together, trying to say that we will come out and make Sri Lanka win, I have very little doubt that it's only natural that it will happen.
Thank you. I think since we have the authorities, some of them are seated with us. SLPA is right in front of us. So maybe Captain Nirmal, you all can be the catalyst. Mr. Kanaka is here as well. Maybe you all can be the catalyst to bring these parties together and set up that forum where I think with the new change in the regime as well, there's a lot of trust coming forth. We can see most of the Japanese investors are now willing to come in, which is a good sign. It will also attract other investors into the situation as well. And since we are discussing about this in a big way, maybe SLPA could take that lead and facilitate, because in Sri Lanka we have ministries for everything, but it's very difficult when you want to get things done. So maybe it's something that you all could take and lead. You want to shed some light on that?
Yeah. So I think few things that so understanding why we are gathering here as a stakeholders of ecosystem. So to safeguard the environment. So we are discussing about how we can reduce the impact of the greenhouse gases and the technological advancement for the new innovation with that. So all these things, why we are talking here, is to safeguard the environment. And so the Upul said very true that the total energy generation in Sri Lanka is 42% from the green energy, and rest of that 58% is not from the green source. That we have to think about very seriously, because 58% is a huge amount. And we are come back to again the consumption of the energy by the port of Colombo. Is when you compare to the consumption of energy by the city of Colombo, is 25% we are consuming in port of Colombo. It's nearly about 50 megawatt we are consuming daily. So that huge amount. From that, 42% is from green energy. So what are the initiatives as a country we taken to mitigate this impact and introduces the green energy to the country's energy generation. There are so many steps that we have to take because we are, as a stakeholders and the facilitator to the port community, we have to implement the infrastructure for that, facilitate to them to generate their energy, generate their ideas to here in Colombo. And when you are come back to again the situation in the past, we are started with that the small technologies like the vacuum tube type generation technology. Now we are gradually reaching what are the latest technology in the world. So this forum is to contribute to the nation of Sri Lanka. So how we can improve our technologies to generate energy that is not harmful to the environment. So there are so many steps we have taken. So one is that, so produce of green hydrogen, and there are so many lands belongs to that Port of Colombo and Port SLPA. So we have initiated the steps to harvesting solar energy for the generation of green hydrogen. The project and the process is ongoing. And there are other things that will have to contribute to how we can adapt the latest technology to the Port of Colombo. So those things are on the way that we are expecting to implement the technological advancement to minimize the wastage of energy and minimize the emission of greenhouse gases from this industry. Right? This actually, the investment is very high when we compare to this investment. I mean that initiating that greenhouse initiatives. So we are actually little bit lagging behind, but we are chasing the global, we are chasing to meet the target as mentioned in 2030 program and 2050 program introduced by that IMO. Thank you.
Thank you, Ganaka and the gentleman, for highlighting the need to come up with a policy, because we have most of the stakeholders here in this room. I think it should be a collective effort, because it's not only the bunker supplier, but as well as the port operators, service providers. We need the laboratory to come forward, and also the policymakers to give us room to come up with these initiatives and come up with a timeline to achieve all this milestone stage by stage and prepare ourselves for the future. Right now, I think that's the take home, I think, of this discussion so far that has been highlighted. Yeah, coming back to Safir, now we have talked about decarbonization, and we have no option other than going ahead with decarbonization plans. With regard to that, how do you think that Sri Lanka can get ready to face these future demands and challenge as a bunkering industry's point of view?
Yeah, so I think it's very similar to what I said before. I think as a first step, as I said, it's that all stakeholders need to really sit, because it's really not, as I said, it's really not only a maritime challenge, because I think even for our other industries, we will need this kind of fuel. So for all stakeholders to come to one table and understand what the future transition of fueling in Sri Lanka is an important step. And once we do that, then we will have a clear idea in terms of what fuel we should really go behind. Because as I said, I think to be able to invest on all these things at the same time, it's going to be absolutely challenging. Because I think even when LNG came in Singapore and all that, it's the government who, I think, played a huge part in building that infrastructure. I believe that's That's the most important thing for people to really go. And also another important fact is that whilst now it is all sort of up in the air, these things, like we discussed, it will become mandatory very soon. So the implementation target times will come, and if you don't prepare in advance, what is going to happen is suddenly we will be faced with a situation where we will have deadlines to meet, and where we will probably lose out is the fact that countries around us like India is already preparing. Their energy plan is very, 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 very clear. And if we don't have these products available in Sri Lanka, what is going to happen is, even I would think shipping lines, for example, if Maersk is investing on vessels that's going to run on ammonia or methanol or whatever it is, if we as a port can't provide this fuel, some of those shipping lines might not even call here. So it's not only an opportunity that you will lose from a bunkering perspective, but you will also lose an opportunity from a perspective of being a transshipment hub. So I think making these products available, it's, leaving aside the bunkering industry, I think for the development of the port and keep the port going at the rate that we are going, I think it becomes important.
Yeah, thank you, Safir, once again. Yeah, as you rightly said, unless we plan now, our industry will come to a standstill when this is mandatory. So it's time for us to, start the process and be ready for that need. Thank you. Over to you, Naveen.
So taking the cue from that, maybe I'll turn to Upul, and Mr. Ganaka could also contribute to this. Now, as we, as a port of Colombo, we work as in union with the 3 terminals as well. Now it's 4. So in your discussions, we try to see how we can attract the container vessels to come in. Now, this discussion about clean fuels, and is this one of the topics that you all discuss in your day-to-day discussions, or is this part of your agenda as well?
Yes. So we are actually discussing about the clean fuel, how we can adapt the clean fuel to the industry. So there are so many initiatives we have already done, because that in the region, so the first semi-automated terminal initiated with that is container terminal, and the project is going on there. So many technological advancement and robotics and green robotics investment there, and especially that so AI-based technologies, and how we can adapt the technologies to the port operations also. We are looking forward to do the activities there. And especially that, not only that, equipment automation. So we are looking for the how we can the yard planning and vessel planning. Also how we can implement the AI-based technology for that the yard planning and vessel planning also. That all the things we are going to do in Port of Colombo, because that we are trying to reduce our energy consumption and the introduce of the green energy to the system.
Thank you. Just to go deeper into the subject, my question more is in terms of not being energy efficient. My question is about, are we ready to also supply? Meaning, as Captain Prashant said, Maersk has such a demand, and they would possibly look for, when those ships get into the waters, they would want to call Colombo, and if we can't supply, they would definitely change the route. They will not call Colombo. So we have that risk. So hence the reason why I'm asking, is that part of our day-to-day discussions that when the port team meets up, is this a regular point that you discuss? We need to have this? Do we have a pipeline? Do we know we're going to call up for tenders, call private parties to get on board? So is this a regular discussion point, is my question.
Naveen, as I said, Sri Lanka is signatory to Paris Accord as well as the IMO conventions. So we are pursuing strategies, like as Ganaka explained, it's in the high priority agenda in the SLP as well. So we are working together in multiple folds, like different, we are by trying to tackle it in a different way. And of course, the private sector like Safir and Deepak, they are the people who should be coming into the supply, and of course the CPC as well. And then the port, Abamas is also here, and then we are ready to facilitate that. But one of the biggest things that we are now trying to target is that coming to 2030, IMO has requested, look, all the ships which are entering the port and after berthing, knock off the engines, so that there are no further emissions. For us to facilitate that, you need to give shore power, which is called cold ironing. But unfortunately, we did a research to find out, look, how capable the ships calling it is, the Port of Colombo are for this, so that as a port, we can take a port-wide initiative. But unfortunately, about 90% of the ships are not equipped to do that. Yeah, so even if we have the power connectivity, it's a very expensive, and you have to have a different apparatus, the gear for do that. Ganaka should be able to explain that further. But we had to partner with the CEB, and then for them to, because that's a revenue stream for the port as well as the CEB. So we had to now work with the ships, the shipping lines. Look, how are we, as again Prashant rightfully said, collaborative actions are required. So we have to take these seriously, all of us, and then to pursue. But at the moment, as I said, we are working in silos. We're trying to explore our own these things. Everybody is committed. Everybody has realized that this is something very serious because it is affecting personally all of us. Right? One day, it's not only the corporates, their responsibility they're taking, but as individuals, we will feel it, right? That is what is happening in the country now. So therefore, it's in the agenda, it's being pursued by the government, it's in the policy, but of course, we have to work together to make it a reality.
Adding little more things to that, the Paul's comment. So in Port of Colombo, we are not going to generate revenue from that, the supplying shore power to the vessels, and we are going to facilitate for that the benefit of the environment to reduce the emissions while that the vessels are docking, and so that it would be implemented by mid of 2025. The vessels in year 2025, they reach into Colombo port, so we are ready to supply shore power. So in a single connection, we are ready to supply 2 megawatt supply to the docking facility.
That's great news. I think that's the first time probably most of us are hearing that Colombo port will be ready to give shore power in 2025. So I think, I guess that deserves a round of applause for the efforts taken by the port itself. Thank you. Anu, you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. Yeah, Ganaka, we are very pleased to hear that, actually, as Naveen said. Coming back to Deepak, now we have the demand, we have the vessel's readiness, and we also have the need to increase availability. With that, as LIOC and coming from India to Sri Lanka and investing, do you think the government should open doors for more investors to come and invest in infrastructure development with regards to increase of greener fuels and create policies towards that in going forward basis? And also, we have been hearing from IOC and Indian counterparts that they are taking part in developing the tank farm storage in Trincomalee. Can you enlighten us more on this, whether you are going ahead with this expansion and investment in Trincomalee, and what do you think the government should do and promote with regards to these facilities?
So, but as everybody has already said, there cannot be two views about investment in the core sector in this country. We need huge investment in the port and the ancillary facilities, which includes bunkering. And I think how we do it is a matter of decisions that the government will take. Definitely, it has to be a combination of public-private both. It can be sole private in some cases. It can be PP model in some cases. But I think a lot of huge investments are required in all the ports, including Colombo and Trincomalee, Hambantota, even Galle. I think, geographically, Sri Lanka is positioned in a very strategic locations, and we have all the potential to become a maritime hub. And I think as LIOC, we'll do our best to contribute to that. And I'm sure the authorities will, under this new government, will take, I think, radical decisions to incentivize investment in the core sectors. Because as Zafir has said, any investment, regarding any renewables, it's a very cost intensive. So not only that we need to do that, but also we need to create an environment where those things can be feasible. Let's say, as on date, we don't have sufficient bunkering storage in Colombo, which is one of the most important port. So I'm saying, so there are urgent requirement of investments, and definitely, we'll play our part, as and when the opportunities are there. Coming back to your second question regarding Trincomalee, yes, we are a JV partner with government of Sri Lanka, and our endeavor is to develop the tank farm in Trincomalee. A lot of action has been taken under the previous regime, and we are also waiting for some appointments to be made by the present government into the JV. And we had already called for an EOI for development of the tank farm, and we are on course. We have some interested partners also. And I think in the due course, things will be more clear, but we are fully committed as LIOC and also Government of India for development of, wholesale development of Trincomalee, not only tank farm, also all other, to make that Trincomalee as an energy hub. So our endeavor will be always there.
Okay, thank you, Deepak. Further to that, how do you, LIOC, see the expansion and investment of Sinopec? We heard that they are going to come up with a refinery in Sri Lanka in the near future. Do you think this type of investment and expansion will help our country and the industry?
Definitely, see, any FDI is welcome. When the country needs to grow, there has to be an FDI. And if the FDI is in the energy sector, I think it is most welcome. More so when you have a refinery which is very old, cannot process the Euro 6 products. And that's why I think Sri Lanka is one of those countries where still we are selling Euro 3 products. So, so I would say it is a welcome move. And it is not only, I'm looking that as a wholesome development, because it is also create a lot of other advantages. Let's say availability of product within the country. It will also create a lot of, I would say, employment. It will also create a lot of source of revenue, because the refinery will be a predominantly, export-oriented refinery. So I think a refinery was overdue for this country. I think it is a welcome move, and we don't see anything wrong in that. And I think I will, as an LIOC and as me personally, I hope that similar, FDI's investments happen in all sectors, which, and then only we'll be able to see the type of growth that we are envisaging.
Yeah, thank you, Deepak. One more minute from you. Do you think we have investor-friendly policies in this country? Do you think the government, now we have a new regime, as we have a young politicians regime coming into power, do you think we should start the dialogue with them if we don't have investor-friendly environment and policies? Should those things be changed?
So it's difficult for me to give a one-word answer, yes or no, but I would say no system is perfect. You have to make it better. So there is always a scope for improvement. And I'm sure, with this present government, they will try to, plug the loopholes that are there. But yes, and if I talk about India, we also have evolved with time. And I don't say that we have reached there. So there is still, I think, scope for improvement. So likewise, it is applicable for Sri Lanka. I think subsequent people who are in government or inside or outside has to work to make this country a better place, not only, in terms of facilities, also in terms of ease of work. I think FDI will only come when you see, ease of doing business. And I think we have to, lead by examples. And I'm sure this new government will work on that very seriously. And I think they will take radical decisions to, improve that.
Thank you, Deepak, once again. Yeah, now we know too.
Anu, I just realized we have spent about good 1 hour and 40 minutes already, and we didn't realize. Should we open it for the floor if they have any questions, because we're running short of time? We have a few more questions to ask them, but with the interest of time, if you all have any questions that you want to pose, I can see Michael also in the forum. If there are any questions that you want to pose to the panel, you could ask us now, or we could continue with the questions that we already have. Any questions from the audience? As I predicted, Michael has one. Can we get the mic across, please?
Since you put me on the spot, Naveen. But really good fireside chat, and I learned a lot from everyone. So my question is to Zafir. In terms of bunkering, and I know there are several options that many have been talking about, but personally I feel like biodiesel is a low-hanging fruit that we can all look at. So my question is, let's say, for example, if a few corporates get together, maybe with the government, and invest in a biodiesel plant, do you think that shipping lines would actually utilize a facility here, or would they rather go to a more seasoned facility like maybe in Singapore?
It's like this. So finally, I think the decision of a shipping line whether to pick that biodiesel from here or Singapore will work on economics, whether are we cheaper. So even if you really look at it, most vessels that has an option of going to either Singapore or let's say for Fujairah that matter, they wouldn't buy the bunkers from here. So if you look at most of the major container lines, on their main routes, they wouldn't buy the bunker here because they have an option of going to either Singapore or Fujairah. So in that context, if they have the option in Singapore, I think Singapore will always be cheaper because of the scale at which that they produce things. But if the product is available itself, there will be a different market. For example, East Coast vessels going to Africa, there is a different market that we cater to here from the bunker perspective. I think those vessels we have a potential to give. And I think the things like methanol and biofuel, correct me if I'm wrong, Captain Prasant, but I think in terms of a storage perspective, even with minor adjustments to the current storage that we have, which we are showing conventional fuel, we can, I think, easily store. And even so really, if you look at the bunkering business, there are a couple of elements in that whole supply chain, right? One is the storage, second one is the delivery aspect, the barges and the pipelines and everything that you need. So I think from a methanol and a biofuel perspective, I believe that you can use the current infrastructure with minor adjustments. Whereas the other ones, you have to do massive capital-intensive investments, which anyway we will have to do at some point. But answering your question, yes, I think there will be a market in the future if these products are available.
Safir, I have adding on to Michael's question, how do you think the technology will help us introducing these alternative fuels? Like in Singapore, we have seen mass flow meter with digital EBDN, etc., and they're coming up with new technologies as well. Will that be an added advantage on introducing future fuels?
Yeah, so I think irrespective of whether it's future fuel or current fuel, I think those are more from a transparency perspective. Because if you really look at it, the mass flow meter was bought to bring credibility to the Singapore market. Because as you know, there's been lots of things that happens in the bunker market. So in order to bring credibility, I think the mass flow meter was introduced by the Singapore government, and I'm sure now it's Rotterdam is also probably going to sort of mandate it. So I think whichever fuel that you use, I think in terms of bringing these kind of technology will bring, especially the mass flow meter, I think will bring that whole transparency perspective. I think the EBDN is more from a process angle in terms of billing and all that. I think that process angle, also can be done. But things like EBDN is I think we can simply sort of implement in Colombo, I believe. Flow meters, of course, there's an investment that is involved, but I'm sure those things can be done.
Thanks, Hafir. To the audience to ask any other questions if you have.
Hi, my name is Kumudini Bandara. I represent Planetary Carbon Standard. Apart from the everything else that was discussed in this event, we speak common language when it comes to these green initiatives. That's what I understand. That's my field. So I realized that you have been, as an industry, you have been given a target to achieve net zero by 2030, 2040, likewise. So apart from looking for alternative fuel and like green hydrogen or green any other energy, what initiatives that you have? Because I know, like, although we have these short-term and long-term targets, what we really do, sometimes they are not sufficient, they are not speed enough. So what kind of what kind of initiatives that you have taken as an industry to achieve your targets, such as ESG strategy or something, or I'm talking about Sri Lankan context, not only on Sri Lankan context, like internationally or whatever.
I think Captain Prashant could maybe add more on that.
I'll be happy to talk about it from an international shipping standpoint, and then of course our colleagues can join here to talk about Sri Lanka from that perspective. I think it's quite clear, right? From an ESG standpoint, and then again, there's a first here, but it's not about being first, it's also about having the followership. As Maersk, we set out an ESG strategy, an environment, social governance strategy. We were the first to do that. You spoke about 2040, 2030, and near-term targets. We are the first to actually be recognized and validated for our targets by Science-Based Target Initiative under the new maritime guidance. What it basically means is that Maersk has a roadmap to follow to achieve what we've set out. Now, that has been a process of a lot of stakeholder engagement because we are a transport and logistics company. But we, of course, decided, and our leadership decided, and then we've gone about finding ways and collaborating with partners, experts, to be able to find this, come along the journey. Now, when we say this, we are actually, because we're a transport and logistics company, we cut across the modes of transport. So far, we've been talking about shipping and ocean alone. But I have to tell you, I have my good colleague here who's the country manager for Sri Lanka. He's responsible for our logistics and services division, right? Which is a key pillar in our business. And one of the things that gets cascaded is that the land side has to also be decarbonized. What that means is the warehouses that we use, whether we own it, if we own it, of course, the renewable energy that we then procure has to be green in the true sense. If we lease it, we hold our partners who we lease it from, the landlords, accountable to actually powering our warehouses with green energy. Similarly, when it comes to terminals, we are a strategic partner with SAGT as APM terminals. We are on that journey where Upul spoke about powering, having hybrid RTGs, replacing, and how can we are on a journey, right? We also have Maersk Air. So as part of Air, only yesterday we've announced Lufthansa, along a partnership with Lufthansa Cargo, of actually procuring sustainable aviation fuel for powering our cargo movement, air cargo movements. Similarly, when it comes to road transport across the globe, in US we've deployed long-haul EVs, trucks. Similarly, we've done stuff in India and other parts of the world, right? So we are really cutting across the modes of transport and making sure that wherever we touch across the direct emissions, indirect emissions, as well as renewable energy, we are moving in the right direction. Sorry for the long answer, but it was just to set the context, right? But I'll maybe help get some inputs from the colleagues in Sri Lanka.
So I won't be able to tell you about the industry, but I can tell you about what LIFC is doing in this regard. See, our endeavor has always been to reach, a net zero. So our parent company has got a target of 2046 to become net zero, which indirectly also applied to us. So our endeavor always has been to, because we are in a kind of trade where, you cannot avoid emissions, but how best you can, reduce it. So what we have done is, first we have tried to solarize our sheds. So as on date, out of 276 shades, we have put solar on the top of the canopy of the shades. So the operation of those shades are being taken care of by the solar power. We also, our endeavor has been to introduce more energy efficient fuels, which give you more power and less consumption. So we have introduced recently an extra premium 100, which is a fuel which is available only in 8 countries in the world, including India, which is also available here in Sri Lanka. We have put it in selective outlets. This is precisely for the high-end vehicles. Apart from that, we have also put EV charging stations in our outlets. Already we have put 5, and discussions are on to put in all the sheds, which will allow the smoother transition of vehicles from fossil fuel to EV fuel. So we are also investing largely on that. We have a terminal in Trincomalee that also we are solarizing. I think another 6 months, the entire terminal will be operated through a solar energy. So likewise, our endeavor has always been to reduce the consumption of fossil fuel and encourage, and also reduce. We are also doing a lot of, what do I say? A lot of knowledge sharing as to how you should, drive to reduce, your consumption of fuel, Also, so this conservating efforts are there. We are recently going to also launch one scheme both on radio and TV, where we'll educate people as to how to deal with your car to reduce your consumption of fuel and all. So being in a trade where you can't avoid, but still you can do your best to reduce it, we are working on that. We are also have plans to invest in renewable energy in Trincomalee. So I would say yes, we have a target and we are on track on that.
Safir, would like to add more?
Just one other point to add is that you all might be wondering as to why these companies are doing. This is not in the goodness of the hearts of the company is doing it. It's on its own. Because if you really look at it from a funding perspective, if you take some of the bigger organizations, today if you want to go to multilateral agencies like the ADB, the IFC for funding purposes, one key element in the whole evaluation of your project is how compliant are you with this ESG. So that becomes a critical element for evaluation. And even today in the commercial sector, if you actually go for loans, there are green funding. Actually, you will get these fundings at a much better rate than the normal interest rates if you are ESG compliant. So going forward, whether you get, even for listed companies, if there are big investors who would want to come and invest in your company, going forward, one critical element that they will also look at to see is how compliant are you with your ESG, what are your targets, what are your strategies. So now this is becoming not something that it's good to do. It is becoming mandatory for big organizations to do it from a funding perspective. From a stakeholder perspective, your customers, I'm sure Maersk will, or even IOC, from a stakeholder perspective, customers in the future will start to look at companies and only deal with companies who are ESG compliant and see what steps that they are taking. So from a funding perspective, from a customer perspective, from many stakeholders, this pressure is going to come.
Thank you, Safir.
I hope we've answered your question. Yeah. Any more questions from the audience? There's one more there. Excuse me, there's one more there.
Hello, I'm Rusuru Guru Singh, electrical engineer of SLPA. I just want to ask that as well as debates going on due to the difference debates in Sri Lanka, it is noted that we cannot go for 100% newer renewable energy due to the intermittency and the seasonal effects of the NRB. So what are the future trends that we have taken to account these issues with the renewable energy to mitigate that seasonal and what you call seasonal effects and intermittency? And the other hand, as per the Mr. Ganaka said that 25% of total lot of power demand of Colombo districts are taken by Colombo port. So what are the things that we have to take an account to demand side management in port industry?
Mr. Ganaka, would you like to?
Yeah. So that so only thing that will have to reduce the consumption of energy by introducing the latest technology to the industry, because that part we have already taken care of that, already implemented some technologies to the system, and as the colleague said that we have already introduced that, except in that RTGs, we have introduced ERTGs to the systems, and so the optimization of energy consumption is the mandatory requirement. And also that, so I would like to say that we couldn't able to become a refueling station in Sri Lanka for the fossil fuels, and we have to think about how we can be a refueling station for the greenhouse. I mean that the green sources of energy to refueling station in Port of Colombo or in Sri Lankan ports. Right. I think that your question is that the optimization of energy, and you are mitigating the impact of that. So this is actually not only the task from the SLPA or the sector, and also that the utility supplier will have to focus on that matter also. So I think we'll be able to get that information from that the utility suppliers as well. So we are not in the position to give the 100% answer for your question.
Thank you, Ganaka. I think he answered your question. I think we have one more question from the Harbour Master, Captain Nirmal.
Yeah, I think more than a question, I will end with a question Naveen was also asking during the course to add something what you were trying to prompt about the LNG to make aware. Maybe not much is aware, not many are aware about the LNG coming in tank tankers. Yes, the Subadanavi and the new power station, they are going to start using LNG. There is already a MOU signed between Petronet of India and LTL under the auspices of Ministry of Power and Energy back in August. That project should be completed within 18 months. So we are looking at getting LNG in tank tankers by early 2026. We at SLPA, like Ganaka said, we have already started discussions on that, and because we have to facilitate that, just to give an idea, they are looking at a requirement of about 40-foot tank tankers per day for the consumption. So to get it down from Cochin on a dedicated vessel, that type of thing is being looked at. So we as SLPA also looking at facilitating, giving storage, the transportation from here to the power station. So that is being looked at. So we can think of, we can see it coming, because they are going to, otherwise the power stations which they built for that will be a waste. So they are going ahead to start using LNG by that time. Moving on, I think about the fuels, Prashant, I think maybe you can shed some light on it. Me and Ganaka, we attended the IMO seminar on this last year about the green fuels, and they are also, from the experts what we got, no one has decided which one would be the ideal future fuel. But I see now Maersk has gone in a big way when you say 20 vessels and another 50, so you all must have done some research in going into methanol, but then the thing is you need bigger space, less calorific value. You said 3 times the cost, so all that will go into. So like Safir said, we have to look at what will be, we can't have storage for all the green fuels which would come in. So maybe if you can shed some light how you all went to methanol, just for the knowledge of us. And just another point, I think the point of if we are not having the bunkering facility for a particular future fuel, I think because talking to the master during her maiden call at Colombo, the first one which came, so I think if I remember right, they have a capacity of about 16,000 cubic meters, and it was enough for them to go from east to the west. They said on delivery they bunkered in Ulsan and then Shanghai and Rotterdam, which is enough for them to cover. So I think that type of thing also to allay the fears that whether the ships will not be coming because we are not having that fuel. If you can shed some light, Prashant, thank you.
Thank you for very pertinent questions and also clarification. I think it's not binary, and not just for Maersk, right? For all shipping lines, the fuel tank capacities are much larger. So it's not binary that we will not come to Colombo. I think we need Colombo more today than otherwise. But I also think that across the ecosystem, all stakeholders, right, need to remember this little one line here. A do-nothing approach, right? So sitting on the fence, a do-nothing approach is not a flat line. It's actually a down curve. So each stakeholder in the ecosystem, if we are not thinking enough about it, please be prepared to brace yourselves for losing in the way forward journey, right? And once we've acknowledged that we need to do something, it's a great starting point. The next thing is to reach out to stakeholders. Nobody in the room here has answers to everything. But if we all come together, collaboration will be the key across the ecosystem, right? We need the suppliers, we need the demand side, we need the regulators, and that's basically the conversation that we are having. And as Maersk, who are leaders here, I would just like to conclude by saying that we are a trusted advisor, we are a knowledge partner to Sri Lanka, and we will continue to, in a humble capacity, offer what we can to help Sri Lanka continue to move forward on this journey, and would only want to wish that we continue to do that. So that's basically how I would see this. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. I mean, maybe you can go with the last question. Any other questions from the audience? Or as Naveen, I think you could ask your last question from Christina.
Christina, in terms of collaboration, as we spoke now, how can collaboration between shipping companies, port authorities, and the technology providers help us to accelerate this process? Mainly asking from your experience perspective.
Time's up. Yeah, so it's, as it has been said, nobody, no single person, no single entity has all the answers. So it's in itself essential that those three work together. So port authorities and governments have, of course, the chance and the duty to set the framework conditions. The rest of us has to adapt to them and bring in new ideas and be creative on how to do that. So Maersk is a good example. Going forward, there are other opportunities. So in Europe, we have some funding, public funding from the European Union, for example. There's a big funding program set up, the Green Deal, which focuses exactly on establishing future-proof and sustainable measures for the transport sector, not only, but mainly for the transport sector. So in a smaller scale, that's more for future development, like hydrogen. How can that be done? Because this is, at the moment, this is only in the development stage. It's not really practical right now. It's cost intensive. There are trials going on. For example, in Hamburg, we have a small hydrogen fuel station. There was a shipment from Abu Dhabi, which is a good example for collaboration, because this was initiated by our Minister for Economics, making an agreement. and then it was implemented. The container was shipped to Hamburg. It was unloaded on a container terminal. It was transported to an industrial company wants to try to use it. So kind of supply chain experience. So, and we need to work on that closer also in the future.
Thank you, Christina, for those final notes. And with that, we would like to wrap up the session. But before that, I would like to thank you, Captain Prashant and Christina, for coming all the way and share their knowledge with us, and also the other expert panelists to share their thoughts with us for the betterment of the industry. So we are thankful once again, and also thank you for the audience, for being a wonderful audience, and be with us until we conclude this session. Hope you will have a great evening. Thank you very much, everybody.
Dear speakers, kindly remain on stage. So thank you, moderators, Mr. Navin and Ms. Anurodha, for guiding us on today's chat. And of course, thank you, panelists, for sharing the latest trends, regulations, and new information on maritime sustainability. And speaking of sustainability, this conference has been conducted as carbon negative event. Now, Aramex will be handing out gift bags to our panelists and speakers. I repeat, Aramex is our main sponsor for this event.